A $200 case just made every case that costs more look bad. That's not an exaggeration, and it's not a marketing line either. When Tom's Hardware ran their thermal benchmarks, this case posted the lowest graphics card temperature of anything on their test bench, beating cases that sell for $30, even $50 more. When Gamers Nexus ran their noise normalized charts, the same case landed at the top. Two of the most respected names in PC hardware testing, running two completely different test methodologies, and they both arrived at the same conclusion. That almost never happens. So what is this case, and why did it take everyone by surprise? This is the Cooler Master HAF II 500, and if that name sounds familiar, there's a reason for it. Cooler Master's HAF lineup has history. The original HAF X and the HAF 932 were the cases enthusiast builders talked about over a decade ago, back when massive airflow and oversized fans were still a novelty instead of an industry standard. Then, the HAF name kind of faded into the background while other case makers took the spotlight. Now, Cooler Master is bringing it back, and they're not being subtle about it. This is a callback to the roots of high airflow enthusiast building, built for people who care more about keeping their hardware cold than about a fancy dashboard app controlling their lighting. Let's talk about what's actually inside the box, because the fan setup here is the whole story. The HAF II 500 ships with 3 fans pre-installed, and none of them are ordinary. Up front, you get two 220mm intake fans from Cooler Master's Mighty 40 line, and out back, a single 180mm exhaust fan from the same family. The 40 in Mighty 40 refers to the fan thickness, 40mm, which is noticeably chunkier than the 25mm fans most cases ship with. Think of it like the difference between a small desk fan and an industrial floor fan. More blade surface, more air moved per rotation, and critically, less need to spin fast to do it. Each 220mm front fan can push over 200 CFM of airflow, and Cooler Master rates that at a relatively low 1050 RPM. That's the trick. You get big fan performance without needing screaming fan speeds to get there, which is exactly why the noise numbers hold up as well as they do. But here's where it gets interesting, because raw fan output alone doesn't win a case review. It's actually the easiest number to fake. Add a small open air test bench, throw a dozen fans at it, and you'll top every airflow chart in existence. Gamers Nexus made a point of calling this out directly in their testing notes, saying that noise-normalized testing is the metric that actually matters, because otherwise anyone could strap a wall of fans to an open frame and call it the best case, without accounting for how loud it has to run to get there. So the real question isn't whether the HAF II 500 can push air, it's whether it can push air quietly enough that you'd actually want it sitting under your desk. And that's where the story starts to get complicated. Tom's Hardware ran 2 separate testing conditions. First, a noise-normalized test, where fan speeds are capped to match a specific decibel level, so every case is compared fairly. Under that condition, the HAF II 500 already led the graphics card temperature charts. Then, they cranked the fans up to full speed to see what the case was capable of at its ceiling. CPU temperatures dropped by about 6 degrees Celsius once the fans were maxed out, landing at an average of 84 degrees. Graphics card temperatures barely moved, only dropping by around 2 degrees to land at 67 degrees Celsius, which was still the best GPU result in their entire test group. That's an important detail, and it tells you something about how this case is built. The front intake fans are positioned to blast cool air almost directly across the graphics card before it reaches anything else in the system, which explains why the GPU numbers stayed strong even without pushing the fans to their limit. Now, before you assume this case is a flawless piece of engineering, let's slow down, because no review this positive comes without an asterisk. And if I don't tell you about it, you're going to find out the hard way after you've already installed your hardware. Build quality on the HAF II. 500 is genuinely well regarded across the board. It supports full-size eGAI-TX motherboards, which is larger than what most mid-towers can fit. The motherboard standoffs come pre-installed at the factory, which sounds like a small thing until you've spent 20 minutes on your knees trying to screw them in yourself. There's a large cutout behind the motherboard tray for cooler installation, and Cooler Master punched out plenty of cable routing holes around the edge of the board, plus a sliding motherboard cover to help hide the mess behind the panel. Storage flexibility is solid too, though it depends on your power supply length. With a shorter PSU, under 150mm, you get room for 3 3.5-inch drives and 6 2.5-inch drives. Go with a longer power supply, and that shrinks to 2 and 4, respectively. It's a reasonable trade-off, and one most builders won't even notice unless they're running a heavy multi-drive storage setup. Here's the part that I think actually matters more than any single benchmark number. The original HAF series became a cult favorite over a decade ago because it solved a real problem at a moment when cases genuinely struggled with airflow and thermal headroom. High-end hardware has gotten dramatically hotter since then, graphics cards especially, and case design mostly caught up by adding more small fans rather than rethinking the whole approach. And what Cooler Master did here is go back to the original idea, just bigger fans, less resistance, better fundamentals, and build it around modern hardware sizes and modern cable management expectations. Whether that approach is worth $200 depends entirely on what you're building and how much heat your hardware is actually generating day to day. If you're running a high-end graphics card that regularly bumps against its thermal limits, or you're doing rendering or AI workloads that keep your system under sustained full load for hours at a time, the HAF II 500 solves a problem you actually have. If your current build runs cool and quiet already, this case is a nice upgrade, not a necessary one, and that distinction is worth being honest with yourself about before you spend $200 on a new chassis. Before we wrap up, if this kind of straightforward hardware breakdown is useful to you, consider subscribing, since we'll be covering more case and cooling comparisons as new hardware releases through the rest of the year. At the end of the day, the HAF II 500 isn't a revolutionary case. It's a well-executed return to an idea that already worked, updated for the thermal reality of modern hardware. That's not a flashy conclusion, but it's an honest one, and honestly, that's exactly what this case is. It doesn't need to reinvent the category to earn its spot at the top of these charts. It just needed to take airflow seriously again and stop treating quiet operation and cooling performance like they have to be opposites. If Cooler Master keeps building on this instead of letting the HAF name fade out a second time, this could be the start of something the enthusiast community actually asked for. What do you think? Is $200 a fair price for this level of cooling, or does the market need to catch up to justify it? Let me know down in the comments.